The Middle East is a region in constant flux, a place where history and modernity collide in a complex web of alliances and rivalries. This region has been the focal point of global attention for decades, if not centuries, due to its strategic importance and the myriad of conflicts that have erupted within its borders. The intricate relationships between countries in the Middle East are often influenced by historical grievances, religious differences, and geopolitical interests. These factors create a dynamic and often volatile environment where alliances can shift rapidly and rivalries can flare up with little warning. Recent events have once again brought this volatile region to the forefront of global affairs. From the ongoing conflicts in Syria and Yemen to the ever-present tensions between Israel and its neighbors, the Middle East remains a hotbed of activity that demands the world's attention. Jake Sullivan, the U.S. National Security Advisor, recently concluded a visit to Israel, a trip fraught with geopolitical significance. His visit was not just a routine diplomatic engagement, but a critical mission aimed at addressing some of the most pressing issues facing the region today. Sullivan's visit comes at a time of heightened tensions in the region. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the Iranian nuclear threat, and the broader struggle for influence among regional powers all contribute to a highly charged atmosphere. Sullivan's visit comes at a time of heightened tensions in the region. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the Iranian nuclear threat, and the broader struggle for influence among regional powers all contribute to a highly charged atmosphere. The stakes are incredibly high, and the outcomes of these diplomatic efforts could have lasting impacts on the region and beyond. The Iranian nuclear deal remains in limbo, a point of significant concern for both the United States and Israel. While the U.S. is keen on reviving the deal to curb Iran's nuclear ambitions, Israel remains deeply skeptical and worried about the potential consequences of such an agreement. Israel continues to express concerns over Iran's regional ambitions. The Israeli government views Iran as a direct threat to its security and has consistently opposed any deal that might empower Tehran. This difference in perspective between the U.S. and Israel adds another layer of complexity to Sullivan's mission. The Syrian civil war, now in its second decade, continues to rage with various regional and international actors vying for influence. The conflict has created a humanitarian crisis of epic proportions, displacing millions and causing untold suffering. The U.S. and its allies are deeply involved in efforts to stabilize the region, but the path to peace remains elusive. With various regional and international actors vying for influence, the Syrian conflict is a microcosm of the broader struggles that define the Middle East. The involvement of foreign powers, including Russia and Iran, complicates the situation further, making it a focal point of international diplomacy. The Biden administration has sought to re-engage with the region after the tumultuous Trump years. President Biden's approach marks a shift from the previous administration's policies, aiming for a more balanced and diplomatic engagement with Middle Eastern countries. Sullivan's visit to Israel was part of this effort, aiming to reassure a key ally and coordinate policy on a range of issues. His meetings with Israeli officials were designed to strengthen the U.S.-Israel relationship and address mutual concerns, particularly regarding security and regional stability. Aiming to reassure a key ally and coordinate policy on a range of issues, Sullivan's visit was a delicate balancing act. The U.S. is committed to supporting Israel's security, while also pursuing broader regional goals that may not always align perfectly with Israeli interests. However, the U.S. is also seeking to revive the Iranian nuclear deal, a move that Israel views with deep skepticism. The challenge for Sullivan and the Biden administration is to find a path forward that addresses the concerns of both nations while promoting regional stability. A move that Israel views with deep skepticism. The revival of the Iranian nuclear deal is a contentious issue. Israeli leaders have been vocal in their opposition, arguing that the deal does not do enough to prevent Iran from developing nuclear weapons. This delicate balancing act between reassuring an ally and pursuing a policy that the ally opposes highlights the complexities of navigating the Middle East geopolitical landscape. The U.S. must carefully weigh its actions to avoid alienating key partners while striving to achieve its broader strategic objectives. The U.S. must weigh its interests carefully, as any misstep could have far-reaching consequences. The Middle East is a region where the stakes are incredibly high, and the outcomes of diplomatic efforts can have global implications. As any misstep could have far-reaching consequences, the U.S. must navigate this complex landscape with caution and foresight. The decisions made today will shape the future of the region and influence global stability for years to come. The Syrian opposition, a fractured and diverse collection of groups, has long been a source of instability in the region. This opposition is not a single entity, but rather a mosaic of factions, each with its own goals, ideologies and methods. Some groups are secular while others are Islamist, some are moderate while others are extremist. This diversity has made it challenging for any unified front to emerge, leading to internal conflicts and power struggles that have only exacerbated the overall instability in Syria. Within this already complex landscape, the role of the pro-Israel lobby adds another layer of intrigue. The pro-Israel lobby, particularly in the United States, has been a powerful force in shaping foreign policy. Through organizations like AIPAC, it has influenced lawmakers and public opinion, often advocating for policies that align with Israel's strategic interests. This lobbying effort has not only affected U.S. policy towards Israel but also towards the broader Middle East, including the Syrian conflict. The Syrian uprising, which began in 2011, quickly descended into a brutal civil war. What started as peaceful protests against the Assad regime soon turned violent as the government cracked down on dissent. The conflict escalated rapidly, drawing in various factions and external actors, each with their own agendas. The initial hope for democratic reforms was overshadowed by the chaos and bloodshed that followed, leading to one of the most devastating humanitarian crises of the 21st century. As the conflict dragged on, various external actors, including Israel, sought to influence the outcome. Israel's involvement has been driven by its security concerns, particularly the presence of Iranian-backed forces and Hezbollah near its northern border. To counter these threats, Israel has conducted numerous airstrikes in Syria, targeting weapons shipments and military installations. These actions have added another layer of complexity to an already intricate conflict. Israel, concerned about the presence of Iranian-backed forces on its northern border, has provided support to certain rebel groups operating in southern Syria. This support has included medical aid, intelligence sharing, and possibly even arms supplies. By backing these groups, Israel aims to create a buffer zone against its adversaries and to weaken the influence of Iran and Hezbollah in the region. However, this strategy has its risks, as it involves supporting factions that may not fully align with Israel's long-term interests. This support, while not officially acknowledged by Israel, has been widely reported. Various media outlets and intelligence reports have documented Israel's covert assistance to Syrian rebel groups. This clandestine involvement has been a subject of much speculation and debate, raising questions about the ethical and strategic implications of such actions. While Israel maintains a policy of ambiguity, the evidence suggests a calculated effort to shape the conflict in its favor. The pro-Israel lobby, both within the U.S. and internationally, has played a role in shaping public opinion and influencing policy towards the Syrian conflict. Through a network of advocacy groups, think tanks and media campaigns, the lobby has sought to highlight the threats posed by Iran and its allies, thereby justifying Israel's actions in Syria. This influence extends beyond the corridors of power in Washington, reaching into the broader public discourse and shaping perceptions of the conflict. However, the Syrian opposition is far from monolithic. It comprises a wide array of factions, each with its own leadership, objectives, and strategies. Some groups are focused on overthrowing the Assad regime, while others are more concerned with establishing their own control over specific territories. This lack of unity has been a significant obstacle to achieving a coherent and effective resistance against the government forces. The internal divisions have also made it easier for external actors to manipulate and exploit the opposition for their own ends. The presence of extremist groups within the opposition ranks has made it difficult for Western powers to provide full-throated support. Groups like ISIS and al-Nusra Front have exploited the chaos to gain a foothold in Syria, carrying out brutal attacks and imposing their own harsh rule in areas they control. This has complicated the international response, as supporting the opposition risks empowering these extremist elements. Western countries have had to carefully navigate this landscape, balancing their desire to see Assad removed with the need to prevent extremist groups from gaining more power. The role of the pro-Israel lobby, while significant, should not overshadow the complex internal dynamics of the Syrian opposition. The interplay of various factions, the influence of extremist groups, and the involvement of external actors all contribute to a multifaceted and deeply entrenched conflict. Understanding these dynamics is crucial for any meaningful analysis of the Syrian war, and for formulating policies that can help bring about a resolution. The Syrian conflict is a stark reminder of how regional and international interests can intersect, often with devastating consequences for the people caught in the middle. Iran, a major player in the region, views Israel as its arch-nemesis. This animosity is deeply rooted in historical, religious, and geopolitical factors that have shaped the Middle Eastern landscape for decades. The recent escalation of tensions has raised concerns about the potential for Iranian retaliation against Israel. These tensions have been exacerbated by a series of provocative actions and statements from both sides, each accusing the other of destabilizing the region. Arif Ashkenazi, a respected military correspondent, provides insights into Iran's military capabilities and strategic calculations. He notes that Iran's military strategy is not just about direct confrontation but also about leveraging its influence through various means. Iran has a sophisticated military apparatus including a vast ballistic missile arsenal and a network of proxy militias across the region. These proxies, such as Hezbollah in Lebanon and various Shia militias in Iraq, serve as force multipliers for Iran, allowing it to project power far beyond its borders. While a direct military confrontation with Israel remains unlikely, Iran has shown a willingness to use its proxies to strike at Israeli interests. These proxy groups can carry out attacks with a degree of deniability, complicating Israel's response and international diplomatic efforts. The recent attacks on U.S. bases in Iraq, attributed to Iranian-backed militias, serve as a reminder of Iran's capabilities. These attacks demonstrate Iran's ability to disrupt U.S. operations and signal its readiness to escalate if necessary. Ashkenazi argues that Iran is unlikely to risk a full-scale war with Israel, as it would be a costly and unpredictable endeavor. The potential for widespread destruction and loss of life makes such a conflict undesirable for both nations. However, he warns that Iran may resort to limited strikes against Israeli targets, particularly if it feels that its interests are directly threatened. These limited strikes could serve as a warning or a means to rally domestic support within Iran. The possibility of Iranian retaliation adds another layer of complexity to an already volatile situation. Diplomatic efforts to de-escalate tensions are ongoing, but the risk of miscalculation remains high. Israel, for its part, has vowed to respond forcefully to any Iranian aggression. Israeli leaders have made it clear that they will not tolerate attacks on their territory or interests, and they are prepared to take preemptive action if necessary. The specter of war hangs heavy over the region, a stark reminder of the high stakes involved. The international community watches with bated breath, hoping for a resolution that avoids further bloodshed and instability. Efforts by international bodies such as the United Nations to mediate and find a peaceful solution are crucial. Diplomatic channels must remain open, and all parties involved need to engage in constructive dialogue to prevent a catastrophic conflict. The human cost of any potential conflict cannot be overstated. Civilians, especially women and children, would bear the brunt of the violence, leading to a humanitarian crisis of unprecedented proportions. Grassroots movements and calls for peace from within the region offer a glimmer of hope. These voices advocate for a future where dialogue and cooperation replace hostility and conflict. History has shown that even the most entrenched conflicts can find pathways to peace. It is imperative that all stakeholders remember the lessons of the past and strive towards a future where peace prevails over war. Kamal al-Labwani, a prominent Syrian opposition figure, has caused a stir with his recent calls for peace with Israel. Al-Labwani's proposals, while controversial, have sparked debate about the possibility of a negotiated settlement to the decades-long conflict. Al-Labwani, a longtime critic of the Syrian regime, argues that the Syrian people have suffered enough and that peace with Israel is essential for Syria's future. He has called for a two-state solution based on the 1967 borders, with East Jerusalem as the capital of a Palestinian state. His proposals have been met with mixed reactions. Some within the Syrian opposition have welcomed his initiative, while others have condemned it as treasonous. Israel, for its part, has remained cautious, with officials expressing skepticism about al-Labwani's ability to deliver on his promises. Al-Labwani's peace initiative, while facing significant obstacles, represents a glimmer of hope in a region mired in conflict. Whether his efforts will gain traction remains to be seen, but his willingness to engage in dialogue is a positive step.